Hey everyone. So today we're going to be talking about factoring polynomials. This lesson is what I would call a very good overview of all the different types that you need to know. Factoring is one of those things you're going to need regardless of what grade you're in. So if you're in year 2, foundation year, IB1 or IB2. As you get older, your ability to factor needs to improve, especially speed-wise. So you'll learn a lot of tricks today that will help improve that. Try and keep your questions down to at least 30 seconds apiece. If you can do that, you're in pretty good stead. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is talk about the different techniques that there are and what it is that you want to look at no matter what question is you're faced with. First of all, when the question says factor, you want to see if there is a common factor. That's the first thing. What I mean is there anything, either a numerical value or a variable value, that is common to the polynomial that's in front of you? So that's the first thing. Once you've taken out a common factor, you want to figure out how many terms there are. So, easiest is 2 terms. If there are 2 terms and they are separated by a negative sign, then you want to look for something called a difference of squares, which means that it's something like this. X squared minus 9. That's a difference of squares. That means that I have a squared term separated by another squared term. Pretty straightforward, and we're going to talk about that. Next, I'm going to jump over to, let's say I have 4 terms. If I have 4 terms, then I'm going to be grouping. When I group, I want to group in groups of 2. So kind of like what I was just doing. And lastly, probably the one that you're going to see the most is when I have 3 terms, also known as a trinomial. So if I have a trinomial, I have 2 different types of trinomials. I have simple trinomials and I have complex trinomials. A simple trinomial we're going to talk about has an a value, which is 1. A complex trinomial has an a value, which is anything other than 1. We were just talking about the different types of factoring. So very closely understand that factoring is the opposite of distributing. Okay, so distributing is simply expanding, otherwise known as FOIL. Now, we've talked about the different types, and we're going to go through various examples of this. So I'd like you to pause the video when you need to, give them a try, and then follow along with the instructions that I provide. So the first questions are very basic. We're going to talk about factoring first by simply removing the common factor. So what is the greatest common factor here? So look at the first 2 questions here. And what's the greatest common factor? What's common that I can take out? So you'll notice from the first example, I can take out a common factor of 2. So 2 goes both into 14 and 16. I can take out 1x. Because I have 2 x's in the first term and 1 x in the second term. And I can take out 1 y because I have 1 y in the first term and 3 y's in the second term. So I draw myself a bracket, and what's left over? I have 7. I took out 1x, so I have 1x left. I had 1 y and I took 1 y, so there's no y's left. Then I have a big plus sign. 16 divided by 2 is 8. I had 1x, I took 1x, great, no x's left over. I had 3 y's, I took a y, so I have y squared left over. And that's the end of that question. Try the next one on your own and pause the video, and then restart the video to check your answer. So I took out a common factor of 9rs squared. So maybe you took out a common factor of 3. So just check really carefully, make sure you get the greatest common factor. I took out an r and an s squared, which left me in the brackets with 3r minus 2r squared and minus 4s. Now, looking in the next set of examples, we're going to factor by grouping. So look at the question. Notice very clearly here that there are 4 terms. So when I'm looking at something like this, with my 4 terms, I want to look at grouping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group the first 2 terms, and then I'm going to group the second 2 terms. So when I group the first 2 terms, the question you want to ask yourself is, what is common? So what's common here is y. So I'm going to take out a common factor of y. And when I take out a common factor of y, I want to say what's in brackets, and I want to put the remainder in there. So there's an x left and a minus 5. So I took out a common factor of y. That means there was an x minus 5 left. Great. Now I look at the next 2 terms, and I want to see what's common there. This time, there's a positive 2 that's common. So I always need a sign. Okay, so this is the most common mistake. A lot of students forget the sign here. You need a sign. So positive 2, and then when I take out a common factor of 2, what's left over is x minus 5. Now, you know how I want to figure out if I'm right? I love being right. So I look at this question and I look, oh my god, this bracket is x minus 5 and this bracket is x minus 5. That's how I know I'm doing this right. So the common bracket, the bracket that I just underlined in blue, that's the first bracket, x minus 5. That's the common bracket. And everything else, so the y and the plus 2, they go in the next bracket, y plus 2. And I'm done. So notice that I have x minus 5 first and y plus 2 second. You could have y plus 2 first and x minus 5 second. It doesn't matter. It's common practice to put the common bracket first. Now, I'd like you to try the next question on your own. So group the first 2 terms and group the second 2 terms and see how it goes for you. So pause the video right now. And now hopefully you're checking your work. You took out a common factor of x squared from the first 2 terms. You were left with x plus 3. You took out a common factor of positive 2 from the next 2 terms, and you were left with x plus 3 as well. I knew I was right because the brackets were the same, so I'm happy. So that x plus 3 comes out first, and the x squared plus 2 is what's left over. Pretty good. Let's keep going. So now we're going to try and factor quadratic trinomials. So remember I said earlier that there are 2 types of quadratic trinomials. There's simple trinomials where the a value is 1, and there's complex trinomials where the a value is anything but 1. So looking at examples A and B, notice that the value in front of the squared term is 1. So A and B are both simple trinomials. Looking at C and D, notice that the a value is anything but 1. So in C it's 3 and in D it's 8. So we're going to approach the 2 questions slightly differently, just slightly. Okay, so to factor simple trinomials, I look at the first term, which is 1, and I multiply it by the last term, which in this case is 10. So that number is my product. I have a product of 10. The middle number here is positive 7. That means I have a sum of 7. Now here's where we put your brain to the test. I need 2 numbers that multiply to 10, but those same 2 numbers have to add to 7. So give it a think. If you got them right away, that's great. Those 2 numbers happen to be 5 and 2. So because it's a simple trinomial, I can go right to the brackets, which means that the answer is x plus 5 and x plus 2. And we're done. Nice and easy. So let's give the next one a try. My product here is 1 times negative 14, which is minus 14. And my sum here is the middle number, which is negative 5. So I want 2 numbers that multiply to negative 14 but add to negative 5. Those 2 numbers happen to be negative 7 and positive 2. Because it's a simple trinomial, I can go straight to the brackets. That means y minus 7 and y plus 2. Hopefully that was pretty good for you. Those numbers, like finding those numbers, are the thing usually that students have trouble with. To be honest, it takes practice. So get your practice under your belt, and I guarantee it will take you less than 30 seconds to do a question like this. Now, let's do some complex trinomials. I'm going to do two approaches to the question. One is a little bit longer, admittedly. It's called splitting the middle term, or decomposition. A lot of teachers like this method because it really shows what's going on and how to check your work. The second method I like to call the gypsy magic ratio method because there's a little bit of trust involved because you have to believe that you're doing it right. So I'm going to show you both methods. It doesn't really matter to me which method you pick. One is faster than the other, but if you're the type of person who likes to know how things are working, then method one, decomposition, is really good for you. And if you understand how that works and you prefer to use method two, the little magic method, by all means use that. Okay, so you get to pick. I'll show both. So in the first question, I have 3t squared plus 7t plus 4. So using the decomposition method, I need to find a product of 3 times 7. So 3 times 7 here, sorry, my bad. 3 times 4. So my product, just like before, my product is 3 times 4, so my product is 12. And my sum here is 7. So I need two numbers that multiply to 12, but those same two numbers also have to add to 7. So hopefully you figured out those numbers real quick. That's 3 and 4. Now, here's where the tricky part comes in. You cannot, absolutely cannot go right to the brackets. Instead, what you have to do is this. So you have to split the middle term or decompose this middle term. So it starts like this. 3t squared plus 3t plus 4t plus 4. Now, where did I get these numbers from? The 3t squared came from here. The 7t I split into 3t and 4t. Well, where did I get those numbers from? Well, I just got them from here. And then the last number, the plus 4. So decomposing means splitting. So that's how I split the middle term. Now notice you have 4 terms. Oh my goodness, that's grouping. So group the first 2 terms and group the second 2 terms and see what happens. Well, I take out a common factor of 3t and I'm left with t plus 1. And I take out a common factor of plus 4 and I'm left with t plus 1. Well, look at this. How do I know I'm right? Well, I have 2 brackets that are the same. So that's my common bracket, and that comes out front. So t plus 1. And then my other bracket happens to be 3t plus 4. And I'm done. So this is the method of decomposition. I started the exact same way. So I found the product. I multiplied the first number by the last number. The sum is the middle number. I found my 2 numbers. What's different is I am not allowed to go straight to the brackets. So I decompose, I group, and then I take out the common bracket. So that's pretty wicked. Now, let's say I want to do this exact same question another way. Well, how can I do that? So let's take the next example, and we're going to do it using the magic ratio method. So I start out the same way. My product here is 8 times negative 5, which is negative 40. And my sum here is negative 6. So think about it for a moment. What are my 2 numbers that multiply to negative 40, but also add to negative 6? So hopefully you've got your 2 numbers, and your 2 numbers happen to be negative 10 and positive 4. So I could use the decomposition method I just used, or you can trust me a little bit and follow this. So whatever this a value is here, in this question it's 8, in the last question it was 3. We're going to take that 8 and we're going to divide our two numbers by that 8. And I'm going to reduce. No matter what, I have to reduce what I get. So if possible, in this case it is, so I get negative 5 over 4, and here I get a half. So this is the part where you have to trust me. If you read from the bottom up, you will get the following brackets. So if I read the negative 5 over 4 up, I get 4x minus 5. So again, I read from the bottom up, I get positive 4x minus 5. The other bracket, give it a guess, and I'm going to tell you that it is 2x plus 1. So I read from the bottom up, it's 2x plus 1. Now, definitely shorter in terms of time, but you have to do a little bit of trusting me that it's going to work out the same. So you get to choose which method you like. So here's an example I just made, and I'd like you to give it a try. So I'm going to post it up right now, so pause the video. But when you come back, you'll notice that I'm going to do it in both methods. I'm going to do it using decomposition, and I'm going to use it using the magic ratio method. So I'm going to show you both. They'll both come out to the same answer, and that way you can choose the method that you prefer. So give it a go. Okay, so here in the blue, I started at the question, I found my product. 2 times negative 15 is negative 30. My sum is the middle number, so 7. What two numbers multiply to negative 30, but those same two numbers add to 7? We figure out that it's 10 and negative 3. So using the decomposition method, I write 2x squared plus 10x minus 3x minus 15. I group. So I take out what's common from the first two terms, that's 2x, and I'm left with x plus 5. From the next two terms, I take out a common factor of negative 3. And again, I'm left with x plus 5. So I know I'm right because the brackets are the same. So the first common bracket is x plus 5. That goes first. And everything else goes into the second bracket, 2x minus 3. Now, over here in red, I'm using the same numbers that I did before. So my product is negative 30, my sum is negative 7, and my two numbers are 10 and negative 3. This time, I divide by the a value, so the a value is 2. I reduce where I can, so I can reduce this to 5 over 1. Then I read these ratios from the bottom up. So this is 1x plus 5, I don't have to write the 1, and 2x minus 3. Notice my two answers are the same, which they should be. So pick your method. I don't really care if you do like this magic ratio method. If you could do this work over here on the side as opposed to in the middle of your page, that would be fantastic. Trust me, your teacher will appreciate it. All right, next we have what we call a difference of squares. So look at the question. I have a squared term minus another squared term, hence the term difference of squares. This one's pretty easy. I could do the exact same thing I did before, but truthfully, this is way faster. So as soon as I have two terms, and the first term is squared and the second term is squared, and I'm separated by a negative sign, I know this is what I'm doing. So real quick, I look at it. Is there a common factor that I can take out? No, there isn't. So I write my two brackets. I square root the first term, so I get x in one bracket and x in another bracket. I square root the last term, so the square root of 100 is 10, so 10 in one bracket and 10 in the other bracket. And then my signs, one is plus and one is minus, and I'm done. Super quick and super easy. Let's try the next one. So again, I have my two brackets. I look, is there a common factor that I can take out? No, there isn't, so we're good. So I square root 16 and I get 4 and 4. I square root the x squared, I get x and x. I square root the 25, I get 5 and 5. And one sign is minus and one sign is positive. Wicked, wicked. Last one. This one looks a little bit different. Oh, well, I could, if I wanted to, substitute in for the y minus 3. Or I could be super smart and understand that this here represents a term. So basically, it's a term that gets squared. Hey, that's exactly what I've just been doing, so I don't need to worry about it too much. So let's get ourselves going. So this time I just need bigger brackets. So the square root of y minus 3 squared is just y minus 3. So one bracket gets 1 minus 3, and the other bracket gets y minus 3. And the square root of 16 is 4, so 4 and 4. And one sign is minus, and one sign is positive. Well, I just grouped some terms here. So I got y minus 3 minus 4, so that's y minus 7. And I've got y minus 3 plus 4, so that's y plus 1. Admittedly, this one is a little bit cheeky that way, but it's still pretty straightforward. All right, so we're going to try 4 different practice questions right now. There are a variety of the ones, so we're going to see if we can walk through all the rules and see how comfortable you are with all of them. So here's the first question. 4x squared minus 8x minus 32. Well, if I look at it right away, it's a trinomial. So that's great. But remember, the first thing I always want to ask myself is there a common factor? And is there one? Well, yeah, there is. It's actually 4. So I'm going to take out a common factor of 4, and I'm left with x squared minus 2x minus 8. Hey, well, that's not so bad, because what's left in the bracket is now a simple trinomial. So we're pretty good to go. My product is equal to 1 times negative 8, so negative 8. And my sum is the middle number, so my sum is negative 2. Well, what two numbers multiply to negative 8 but add to negative 2? Negative 4 and positive 2. Awesome. Remember, because it is a simple trinomial, I can go right to the brackets. So the 4 stays out front. It's baggage. You never want to lose baggage. And then x minus 4 in one bracket and x plus 2 in the other bracket. And you're done. And here's our next example. 8x cubed minus 50x. Well, it's 2 terms, so I might be doing a difference of squares, and I have the minus sign, so that's a good start. But I don't have squares. 8 and 50 aren't squares, and nor is x or x cubed, so I got to figure out something else. Again, remember, my first step is there a common factor? Well, there is one here. My common factor this time is 2x. When I take out a common factor of 2x, I'm left with 4x squared minus 25. Well, looky, looky. This now is a difference of squares. Isn't that wicked? So, again, I've got my baggage here, which is 2x. I leave that. And then I draw my 2 brackets again, remember? And the square root of 4 is 2, so 2 and 2. The square root of x squared is x. And the square root of 25 is 5 and 5. And one sign is negative and one sign is positive. Not so bad, people. All right, here's our next example. Minus 9x squared minus 15x plus 6. Well, there's a couple things I really don't like about this question. I really hate that it starts with a negative. So for sure, I'm taking out a common factor of a negative 1. But are there any other common factors here? Well, there are actually. I can take out a common factor of 3. So I'm going to take out a common factor of negative 3. When I do that, I'm left with 3x squared plus 5x minus 2. So make sure that your signs are doing okay here, right? Because I divided by a negative number, so my signs change. Well, if I look at what's left over in the brackets here, I have a complex trinomial. So I want to take my product, and my product here is this 3 multiplied by this negative 2, so my product is negative 6, and my sum is positive 5. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to negative 6, but those same 2 numbers add to 5. Well, what could that possibly be? Well, if I'm looking at it, same two numbers, multiply to negative 6, but add to 5. Let's go for 6 and negative 1. I like that. That's pretty good. Now, I'm going to use the magic ratio method because it's faster. You may use the decomposition method. Remember, your answer will be the same as mine. So I'm going to divide here by the a value, and the a value is 3. So I divide both numbers by 3 and 3. Well, this becomes 2 over 1, and this one doesn't change. So my final answer, negative 3, remember the baggage, and then read from the bottom up, x plus 2 and 3x minus 1. And boom, you're done. And here's our last example for the day. So I've got minus 3x squared minus 48. Well, I've got two terms. I've got a minus sign in between them, but I also have this weird minus sign at the front. And neither 3 or 48 are squared terms, so I'm looking at it and I should take out a common factor. Okay, well, if I take out a common factor, my common factor is going to be negative 3. And I'm left with x squared, and then negative 48 divided by negative 3 is positive 16. All right, well, this looks more like a difference of squares. So I have an x squared, so that's a square term, and I have a 16, and that's a square term. But here's the trick, people. This is a positive sign. So I can't actually go any further. This is the final answer. So be sure that you're paying attention to those signs. They do really matter. Hopefully this lesson was really good for you and a good refresher, if not a very good first time. It's really important now for you to do the practice. This is going to be really important for you so that you can get this skill down pat. Remember, each question should be under 30 seconds in time. Good luck.